Let's talk to God. One more thing, like, subscribe, and share. Come on, let's talk to God. Woo!
Hey, good evening, everybody. It's Cutler here in the Let's Talk to Cutler broadcast, the vlog, the virtual book club, all of the above. And it's good to be here another Thursday. It's August the 25th. The month is moving right along. I want to let you know that if you're just passing by my channel for the very first time, I just want to remind you what this channel is all about. It's about inspiration. It's about motivation. It's about challenging ourselves to see how we can show up a little bit better tomorrow than we did today. It doesn't mean that today was a flop or a failure. It doesn't mean that today was a loss. It just means that we're taking time out of this busy day, about 1,800 seconds that you spend here with Cutler and with the virtual book club members to see what nuggets can I gain from the day. When I look back over the day, what nuggets can I take? What can I hold on to take me in tomorrow that will help me to show up a little bit better, as a better person, as a stronger person, as a more victorious person, as a person who's closer to purpose, who's walking in destiny? What can I do? What can I take with me from today into tomorrow? That's what this station, this channel is all about. It's about really not being judgmental. It's not about being condemning, but it's about reflection. It's about self-reflection. It's about really doing it together as a group, as a family. So I want to thank you all so much for those of you, especially who have been with me for the long haul. I really didn't realize until the other day, I've been doing this for a while. So I want to thank you all, those of you who catch the replay, those of you who catch me live and show up in the broadcast. Thank you all so much for what you do. It encourages my heart. So speaking of encouraging my heart, do me another favor. As you're coming onto the chat, go ahead and do a thumbs up on the conversation. Why do I ask that? Because it says to YouTube, I like what the guy's talking about over there. But more than that, it says to me, Cutler, we are encouraged by your conversations. We're encouraged by our time together. So thank you all so much for that. So go ahead and do a thumbs up on the conversation if you haven't already. And then let's encourage people to come on and let's talk to Cutler as we talk about real issues affecting real people and look at real situations. And then we try to come up with some real solutions, some real components that will help us in our journey along the highway of life. That's why for ever so often you'll see someone say, hey, get aboard, let's ride, because we're riding along this highway of life. We're reading the billboards, we're taking signs, we're taking these nuggets, those sorts of things. So if you haven't, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to my channel? Please subscribe. Please subscribe. And once you subscribe, click on the notification bell, because it lets you know whenever I've gone live. It lets you know whenever I have uploaded new content. So I tell you what I want to do this evening. I want to talk about something else. You all know, I observe people. I pay attention to behavior. Of course, the other day when I was on, I talked about something that was close to me because I realized there was a moment where I could be better and I could have done something different. That is why I talked about the last time we were here. I talked about whether or not we're closed mind or open mind kind of people, and how we can recognize it and help each other to be a little more open minded. Tonight, this evening, I want to talk about why we put up with toxic behavior. Why do we make excuses for toxic behavior? But before I do that, I want to do a shout out on to the LTTC VIP. So let's talk to Cutler, very important people. Everybody's important to me. You all know that. It's just a friendly competition. I like to see who's running over to the chat room first. So I just want to shout out to them, and a special shout out to Annie Cutler, who says, let's get aboard, let's ride. That's what we're doing. Sonia Bailey, my good friend, who says, good evening, everyone. And then T. Cutler, who says, a happy Thursday. Let's talk to Cutler family. Let's ride. Let's ride. That's right. Let's do that. So I want to talk about, why do we excuse toxic behavior? And I want to ask you all that question. Do you ever find yourself excusing toxic behavior? That is the question of the evening. Do you ever, and come on in the chat, invite people. Let's talk about this, because there is a reason why we do this. There's a reason why we excuse toxic behavior and we just let it go. We act as if it does not exist. And I will tell you this, it's one thing to try to understand people, but it's something completely different to make excuses for their behavior. It's one thing to try to understand where people are coming from and why they do what they do, but it doesn't make sense to let people treat you like crap. It does not make sense to let people treat you as if you are a cheap rag. It makes me almost want to say I'm worth more than you're trying to pay. And I don't mean, within the nature of selling yourself, illicitly or anything like that. But in terms of how I'm treated, you have to get to the point where you say, I'm worth more than you're trying to pay. I'm worth more than the attitude. I'm worth more than the behavior. I'm worth more than the responses. I'm worth more than the way you text me. I'm worth more than the way you email me. I'm worth more than the way you talk to me. I'm worth more than the way you respond to me. I'm worth more than the way that you try to demand things of me. I'm worth more than that. Why do we excuse toxic behavior? So the question that I pose to us tonight is, do you ever excuse toxic behavior? And why do we do that? I'm looking at, and I see you all talking back to me in the chat already. I've been asking myself this question the last few weeks. I'm so glad that you're discussing this tonight. I thank you for reminding me that I'm sort of on track with this. And yes, I excuse them because they are a family. And should they get a pass? I like that. Should they get a pass? Should we offer them a pass? Particularly when their toxic behavior affects us. Why do we make those excuses? And I'm not just talking about making excuses when it really doesn't affect us, but even when we know how it affects us psychologically, it affects us emotionally, it affects us mentally, it affects us physically, it affects us financially, it affects us spiritually, it affects us in different realms. Yet we still excuse it. And it's not okay. It's not okay for us to let people treat us less than. It is not okay for us to let people treat us like we are not worthy of the respect that we know we are worthy of. And so many times we end up making excuses for toxic behavior, and sometimes we just do it so much until we don't even realize it. I want to share with you a quote, something that I read yesterday. And this is really what, and that rather is really what prompted this evening's discussion, because it hit me to my core. It hit me to my core when I read this particular quote that says, if you find yourself excusing toxic behavior by saying that's just how they are, you are part of the problem. Let me read that again. If you find yourself excusing toxic behavior by saying that's just how they are, then you are part of the problem. How many times, you all talk to me, how many times have we said things like, oh, that's just how he is. That's just how she is. Oh, that's just her personality. Oh, she doesn't mean any harm. He doesn't mean any harm. That's just how he is. You've got to get to know her. You've got to get to know him. How many times have we said that? Things like, she's not really that bad of a person. He's not really that bad of a person. They're just different. How many, you all talk to me, don't leave me out here by myself. How many times have we said that? Knowing full well that we were excusing behavior, toxic behavior. And it was just affecting you to your core, and you felt helpless about saying anything about it. But I want to talk to us about that. I want to empower us to be able to address the toxic behavior that affects us. You've lived too long. You've come around too many mountains. You've gone through too many valleys. People don't get a pass for being nasty. Maybe that's just me. No more in my life. You don't get a pass for being nasty. You don't get a pass for being disrespectful. You don't get a pass for being unkind. You don't get a pass for being discourteous. Because what happens is that we start internalizing things like that, and you're worth so much more than that. And sometimes we are in spaces and we're in circles where it happens to other people. We go in and out of circles, in and out of spaces, and we watch other people's toxic behavior affect other people. Their feelings are hurt by somebody's toxic behavior. Their emotions are crushed by somebody's toxic behavior. Their self-esteem is questioned because of somebody else's toxic behavior. So it may not necessarily be affecting you directly, but sometimes it affects people in your circle, and you see it, you witness it, and you excuse it. Thank you, MV. I'm with you. No, they should not get a pass. T-Cup, I hear what you're saying. I have even went so far as to say if it wasn't for the fact that they're family, I wouldn't even deal with them. But you know what? We are relatives because of blood, but we're family because of love. I want to empower us. I want to empower us to address the toxic behavior when we see it. Because guess what, you all? If it's in your circle, if you watch people, if you watch people display their toxic behavior on other folk, you got to be careful. Because any given day, any given moment, circumstances and situations are right or wrong, as the case may be, they may explode towards you. So how do you know, Cutler? How can I tell when I'm making excuses? How do I know? I want us to examine our own behavior this evening. I want us to examine our own behavior, because if the question is, how can I tell? How do I know that I'm making excuses and putting up with toxic behavior? How do I know? Give me just a second. This is one of the ways that you can tell that you're making an excuse. You never demand an apology. You know they were wrong. You know they did something wrong. Yes, I just had that happen. I had a family member was rude and very disrespectful while I was making funeral plans for my mother, and his wife said it is because he was in the Army 30 years. Tracy, it happens. We will make excuses for people all the time, but no, you don't get to be disrespectful. You don't get a pass for being disrespectful. You're nasty because people have allowed it. But I was having a conversation with one of my sister-in-law just the other day. And I said, at this juncture in my life, people don't get a pass for being rude. People don't get a pass for being disrespectful. People don't get a pass for being negative. You don't get to throw your darts at me and I pretend that I don't see them coming. You don't get to throw your darts at me and then they pierce me and I feel like they didn't hurt and I act like they didn't hurt. You don't get to throw your darts at me and I act like they didn't come from your hand. You don't get to do that. I want to empower us this evening. You're worth more than being somebody's dartboard, somebody's target. You're worth so much more than that. And no, I don't care what their background is, what their experience. We all have experiences. I walked into a classroom and started teaching over 30 years ago. But that does not mean that I have to take every opportunity and every second and every moment as a teachable moment and show that I have superior knowledge when I really don't have it. I could say, oh, that's just the teacher in me. That's just how I am. It's in my nature to explain, not when you get on people's nerves and not when you're trying to belittle them and not when you're trying to show how superior you are. No, I don't get to do that. I'm telling you. I didn't excuse it at all. I told her he would have to apologize. He mailed a letter with a half apology. I won't answer their calls. May I say I don't blame you? Because in a previous broadcast, we talked about what an apology really is. An apology is threefold. You acknowledge your bad behavior. You acknowledge the fact that your bad behavior had a negative impact on me. And then you try to right the wrong. That's what an apology is. But how do we know we're making excuses? Sometimes we never demand an apology. You don't let yourself listen, you all. And I'm telling you, I'm not here as a clinician. This is just Cutler in my experience. But you don't let yourself continuously forgive someone who refuses to acknowledge when they've done something harmful or hurtful to you. I keep trying to forgive you. And you won't even acknowledge the fact that you did something that was hurtful. You won't even acknowledge the fact that you did something that demands an apology from you. You won't even acknowledge the fact that you were wrong. And you come with a half-handed apology. Well, if I did something. No. It's not if you did, you did. I don't have an attitude, you all. I just want to empower us to stand up for ourselves. He said, apparently, Lord, have mercy. But that is one of the ways you can tell that you're making excuses. Tell somebody, come on, let's talk the color, because we're going to deal with the people in our lives who are toxic. Yet we make excuses. We're going to empower people around us who continue to make excuses for people who just throw the toxicity on them. How else do you know that you're making excuses? Well, you complain about them, but you still try to protect them in the same sentence, in the same conversation. You don't really tell the whole truth. You downplay the magnitude of what they did. Well, they did such and such and such, but it wasn't that bad. No, yes, it was that bad. Because then you go complaining and venting to other family members and friends, and then you downplay the magnitude of the impact that it had on you. That's when you know you're making excuses. They embarrassed you. They hurt your feelings. They disrespected you. And rather than you saying, I was really offended, I was really hurt, you say things like, it wasn't that bad. I don't know whether you're doing it subconsciously or consciously, but how many of y'all have heard people do things like that? You vent, or maybe you've done it. You vent about what the person did in one breath, and then in the next breath, you say, well, it wasn't really that bad. But if you can't be completely honest about what actually happened, most likely you're making excuses for toxic behavior. They said something they shouldn't have said, did something they shouldn't have done, acted a way they should not have acted. And then you still don't reveal the magnitude. I'm telling you, no, you don't get to cuss me out. And then I say, oh, that's just how he is. I mean, it really wasn't that bad. I just, this is what we say. I just let it roll off my back like water on a duck. It wasn't that bad. I've got thick skin. It wasn't that bad. I'm used to it. Thick skin rolling off your back like water on a duck. I'm used to it. You've allowed yourself to be somebody's punching bag. You've allowed yourself to be somebody's dartboard. I hope I'm helping us. You think a couple of this is supposed to be inspirational and motivational, but I'm challenging us to show up better, y'all. I'm challenging us to show up stronger. I'm challenging us to put something in our arsenal where we could cut this kind of stuff off at the root. People don't get the right to be toxic in your life when you've worked so hard to try to clean it up. You're working to sanitize your life, to clean up your life, to get it together. People just come in dropping spots of toxins, and no, y'all don't get to do that. You got to tell them you don't get to do that, and then they act as if it's okay. But let's stop making apologies, y'all. Let's stop making excuses. Demand an apology when you know you deserve one. And if you're going to vent about it and talk about what they did, talk about the magnitude of how it affected you, how it impacted you. Here's another way we make excuses for people. I've seen this recently. You won't even go to certain places with them, or you will avoid certain events and certain gatherings and certain activities because you are afraid, from experience, that something somewhere along the line is going to cause them to show out and act up, and it's going to embarrass you. So you won't go to certain places. You won't participate in certain activities. You won't go to certain family gatherings. You won't go to certain events because you know that just somebody might say something, somebody might look some way, somebody might show up, or somebody may not do anything at all, but there might be something that's going to trigger this bad behavior, and they just going to show out and act crazy. And then you're going to be left feeling nervous. You're going to be left feeling embarrassed. You're going to be left feeling ashamed. You're going to be left regretting that you even showed up. You should not. You should not have to refrain from family events and fun activities just because a person that you know who's toxic might show out. I'm with you. I agree. Oh no, I always said they know what they are doing or saying. Yes, people do know. They know exactly what they're doing. But somewhere along the line, no one has ever called them on the carpet. No one has ever checked them. No one has ever stood up to them. People will bully. People, do you all know that there's still bullies in the world? We're calling it toxic behavior, and it is. But there are people who are still, they're just bullies. They're nasty bullies. And another reason, how do we know that we're making excuses for them? Because we won't tell them the truth. We won't tell them the truth, you all. You all let me know if I'm on spot, if I'm telling the truth, but how many of us know? One of the ways you can tell, or we can tell when people are making excuses for toxic behavior is because we will not tell the truth. We will not say to them, that was hurtful. That was rude. That was disrespectful. That was not courteous. That was inconsiderate. I'm just trying to empower us to stand up to bullies, to stop excusing toxic behavior. Don't let people do that. Tracy, yeah, that is the language. Others just let them get away with it, saying, oh, that's just the way he is. Oh, or that, thank you, or he said in his way, or she said in his ways. No, you y'all, I'm gonna take a sip of this tea. We say people are set in their ways. We say it all the time. We excuse it and keep right on going. Embarrassed when they say things, ashamed, unnerved. But we just say, oh, they're set in their ways. I just don't have the energy for it. I don't. My space, my peace of mind is too important. My ability to go in and out of my circles without feeling ashamed and disrespect and all that, it's just too important for me. How do we know that we are making excuses for people who exemplify toxic behavior? Because we say things like, oh, you know what? That's just who they are now. But you know what? One day they're going to be such and such and such. So you keep trying to look on the bright side of who they will become. But you forget to look on the dark side of who they are. Can I say that again? And I believe in giving everybody a chance. I believe in extending grace, but I also believe in truth. How do we know that we are sometimes excusing toxic behavior? It's because we tend to look on the bright side of who they will become rather than the dark side of who they are in the moment. And do I think people can change? Absolutely. But we've got to be truthful and honest and acknowledge who we see in front of us. We have to. Another way that we tend to excuse toxic behavior. This is how you know you excuse toxic behavior. You're excited. Something wonderful, something blissful, something great, something magnificent happened. And you say to yourself, I'm not going to tell him. I'm not going to tell her, because I know if I tell him, if I tell her, that's going to be a real downer, and it's just going to it's going to rain on my parade. And so you already know the kind of person that you're dealing with, but you say, I'm going to withhold sharing good information or good news about my life from them, because you already know that it's not going to be met with the same enthusiasm, the same excitement, the same exuberance as you had. And so you're hesitant about sharing that kind of information, that kind of good news. I'm just trying to help us, you all. I'm just trying to help us identify toxic behavior. And I'm just trying to call out the signs that we sometimes demonstrate in terms of ignoring it and excusing the toxic behavior. I'm trying to empower us to look at ourselves and look at what we do when we know that there are people who bring negativity into our space, into our circle. And what happens when we don't acknowledge it? We let it continue. And we say to ourselves, oh, it's not really that bad. Yes, it is. Or I can handle it. I can put up with it. But maybe you can. Maybe you're strong enough. But what if they then demonstrate that same behavior on somebody else who can't handle it? And I want to go somewhere with this. They demonstrate and they exemplify that behavior on somebody else who's not as strong as you are, who's not as resilient as you are, and cannot have it. And then what happens if that person snaps? And they retaliate. And then the situation has blown up. What happens then? Or what happens if the person snaps and can't help it and can't handle it, and then does not necessarily snap and retaliate, but says, you know what, I want to take the next way out. Let me just check out of here. And then you have a suicide on your hand. What happens, you all? That's deep, but it's serious. What happens if we're dealing in a circle, in a space where we say, oh, I can handle it, I can put up with it, but you got somebody in your space who can't handle it? And so then they resort to whatever kind of behavior they resort to. But it's self-destructive. And they never say to you, I'm doing this because I couldn't put up, I can't handle this. What do we do? We've got a responsibility to your space. You've got a responsibility to your village. You've got a responsibility to your circle. You've got a responsibility to your community. And you've got a responsibility to yourself. Stop excusing toxic behavior. People will bully you, bully people, as long as they can get by. I'm chuckling because if I went to church, I would hear some preacher say, you know, I'm preaching real good. I'm talking real good. We just put up with it. And sometimes we say things like, oh, you know, they've been through a whole lot. They've had a hard life. And so what happens is you lower your standards for how this is what happens, you all. And this is how I need to conclude our conversation, because what happens is you lower your standards for how you deserve to be treated. You lower your standards for how you deserve to be respected. You open yourself up for destructive behavior from other people. And that should not be the case. That is not okay. I don't care what they went through. I don't care what trauma they had in their lives. They don't get the right, just because they had trauma, they don't get the right to be toxic. And I call each one of us up from that place where we would want to lower our standards, and I call us back up to who we once were. And that's why I wrote this one book that the title of it is Who We Once Were. Because I remember at a point in my life, I realized that I had lowered and sunken what I expected, what I hoped for, what I demanded. And I had this epiphany about not being less than, not being lower, and realizing that I deserved more than I had set or had cast my net. So I call each one of us up, whether you're in the chat with me live now or whether you will see it on this replay. I call each of us back up out of those lower standards that we would have allowed ourselves to go into. And I call us to be who we once were. People who demanded respect, gave it, and demanded it. You all, it has been my pleasure. It has been my honest pleasure to have this conversation that really comes from the core of my soul. People don't get a pass. People don't deserve a pass for being nasty to you in your life. People don't deserve to treat you like crap. People don't deserve to try to buy you or sell you cheap. You're worth more than that. Thank you all so much for spending these 1,800 seconds with me. I appreciate you more than you ever know it. Let's keep building community. Let's keep maintaining connectivity. You all keep your heads up, keep your hopes up, stay safe and stay sane. And please know that from my heart to yours, there is and always will be so much love. And remember these parting words. You're worth so much more. I'll see you all the next time. Good night, everybody.